So that's what I got for SEC basketball. What you got, man? You got anything on the basketball side of it?
Yeah, of course. We're watching what's developing here at Alabama, and it's interesting, man. Because the situation, seems very messy, but I do, to some degree, agree with Nate Oates and Calipari, and I'll explain. So at face value, it sounds really bad. Okay, so you have this guy that was signed to an NBA contract, G League, and so he tries to return. NCAA didn't approve it. The court allowed it. Come to find out that the judge on the case, James Roberts, he was like a big time Alabama booster. Okay, so he had to recuse himself. But the thing is, a lot of people are coming out publicly, including Bruce Pearl, who, has no point talking about morality and what's right or wrong to anybody. But anyway, Alabama, this is really risky, man. And I to be honest, I don't even know if it's worth it and I felt so bad for bediako, man, and playing on the road is something else. But I've seen two situations, man. I think Brandon Miller, when he played, he was dealing with some type of murder case, and bediako, the things that the Florida fans was chanting, and then I look at him and I don't necessarily disagree with them, man. They're calling him like G League dropout or something like that, right. Free throws, and of course that's mean, but that's what he is. And so I'm thinking, okay, so is he really that good to handle what he's going to have to deal with for the rest of the season? I don't know. And then, a lot of times people are looking at the stats, and he had decent stats, but overall, he hasn't made a difference. Now, it's only been 2 games, but, the percentiles, when you look at them for defense and also defensive rebounding, which is where we really need them, there wasn't really a big difference between when he was in the 2 games and out. You have to give them a little time, but they don't have time, man. I mean, Alabama is a top 10 team. They don't have time to allow him to figure it out because you better win, and you better win right away with the threat of having to forfeit these games. And so it's not time to figure it out. But the reason why I see what Nate Oates is saying, and just in the interest of being fair, he brought up a good point. Okay, so who are we applying these pro rules to? And Calipari said the same thing, just U.S. players, because it doesn't apply to international players. These guys have been professional for forever, and they do not lose any NCAA eligibility. Okay, so it's the same difference, and so when I looked at it from that standpoint, it made a whole lot more sense, even though I'm against it at face value. I also think that it erodes the high school game, which is why I think that they're probably going to rule against it, because this is all about money, man. And we're going to talk about later on, the portal and things like that. But, it's big business, not the high school, but the leagues, like the travel and one leagues, man, that's big money. And you got, a lot of times NBA players coaching these teams. I think Durant had a team and stuff like that. So when you start interfering with that, because the floodgates will open, I think at the end of the day, they don't care about bediako. They don't care about Alabama. They don't care about nobody except for the bottom line. And I think that this could set a very bad precedent, even though I'm not as opposed to it as I once was, just because, that's what international players have been doing for quite a while.
Well, there is a big difference on the international side of things. And I don't know if you're aware of this. International players are not eligible for NIL. So They can't, there's no NIL for those guys whatsoever. Arkansas actually has a kid that plays, he's like 21, first year college. He's not any one of the starting, I guess you would say the 10 that rotate out if we have that many. So I hope he had like a little bit of a little egg. He played professional overseas. I don't think it was a major professional, but that's one thing. Former overseas players they cannot, and I'm not sure why. I just know they're not eligible for NIL. So there's a big difference there. So it's not like they got they got paid or
to
like
me,
they're doing here.
That's kind of irrelevant because it's not nobody's bringing up Bediako's NIL.
But that's the only reason why he's coming back, because he can make $2 million sitting there doing that.
Yeah, that's why he's coming back, but that's not what will potentially make him ineligible. Okay, it's the fact that he was a professional player with a contract, which is what these international players are. So, whether they come to school with an NIL, that has nothing to do with the fact that they got paid at some point, so they were professional, so with that, to me, it's the same. Now, if they don't benefit from an NIL, that's college, but were they professional? Yes, they were, so in that instance, I think it's the same thing.
But the way I see it, they're coming from overseas to get with a brand like Calipari. Calipari has a brand, like whether it was at Kentucky, whether it was at Memphis, hell, even if it was at UMass, he was a brand. Over the years, he's built that brand. You play with Calipari, there's a good chance you're going to get drafted. So those kids come over, from Europe or wherever, not getting NIL because they're hoping to use his brand to get into the NBA. Mm-hmm. This kid over here, what did we say his name was again? How do you say it again?
Bediako.
So Bediako is over here like he can't make it because G League, you're not getting paid a whole bunch in G League, and he was undrafted. He left school early to get undrafted, and hopefully he had a degree, which I probably didn't. He left school early to try to go make the big money. He ain't making it, and now he's going, oh hell, I can make it over here in college and do it. Get $1 million to $2 million a year. One's not like the other. One coming from this pro is not coming from this pro. This one's coming over here is because he sees a way to make money over here. And the way I see it, and Calipari is against it, just so you know. But, and I'm surprised with you, and I understand where you're coming from, because your big thing has always been there is nothing wrong with protecting amateurism.
Right.
And we're not doing that now, because some kid that's busting his ass in high school or AAU or whatever is now having a slot taken away from this guy because this guy couldn't cut it in the NBA and got demoted down to G League. And now, he's taking a slot as a scholarship for somebody. And I totally am against that.
I don't disagree with you, but a professional is a professional. You could say they're over here or whatever. They were getting paid. Okay. They had contracts. And so they were not student athletes. So if you're a professional, you're a professional. Okay. So
I agree with you.
We can't split hairs about
I agree with you. I say,
what if he had went and played for Calipari and the brand? He would have had the same exact story. Who cares what he got paid? That it was more or less than professionals for international. They're doing the same thing. So
I agree. And I agree with you. I don't think any of them should be there, whether they were from Europe, whether they're from the G League or whatever. I think once you sign a contract, you lose your amateurism. And somewhere along the way, I mean, I don't understand how courts can just go override. Like, it's like if they can do this, and that means they can just overturn anybody's standard operating procedures at Walmart if they wanted to. No, exactly. So yes, I agree with you on that. And I'm sorry I didn't make that clear. I was telling the difference, but I believe once you sign a contract, I don't care if it was in the Timbuktu League.
Right.
Your amateurism is gone. You can never come back to the NCAA. That's how I feel about it.
I totally like everything that I said. I feel that it will affect the high school game. I feel that it would affect Alabama. I don't even think he's worth it, but at the end of the day, once I looked into it and read, this isn't a precedent, and that's because I'm like, how could this even happen in the first place? And so there has to be an argument, and that's what the argument is. They've been doing this with international players. I don't agree with it, at all, but I'm just saying that's what has been going on. And I think that's why they got as far. But, of course, nobody talks about that. They just talk about, this guy coming back, man. But these pro players, have been doing it forever. And I think that's why Alabama got as far as they did. But I think it's going to hurt them in the long run. And I'm not sad about that, man. I'm not sad about it. I still stand on it. There's nothing wrong with protecting amateurism. And if they rule in his favor, they are not at all.
Well, let me ask you this, because this is the thing. So for me, for Nate Oates, I'm over here like, dude, you're taking a chance. Because let's just say that the courts, because you talk about the judge, right? The judge there that was James H. Roberts Jr. The NCAA challenged him, and they had right to, because he was a donor reported, and his donation range was anywhere. They figured that it's anywhere from 100K to 249K. So that somewhere in there, he's given that much money a year to them to be a donor, right? So he should have recused himself from the get-go on his own self, but that kind of makes it scary. But the thing is, now if you get someone with an open kind of mindset about this, how many? I think y'all played. He's played 2 games. Bediako has played 2 games.
Mm-hmm.
Those are wins that, if he's ruled against, that the NCAA is probably going to make you vacate. That just hurts your chances with.
They lost them, which is my point. I don't see. Let's be clear. Nate Oates would not have gone down this road if all his bigs weren't injured. Right. And so he's really rolling the dice here. And I think it's going to backfire, man, because his presence hasn't even really resulted. Man, Florida ran them off the court. They ran them off the court. And so if you and Calipari, like I said, I listened to his interview. You were right. He did disagree, but he pointed out what I pointed out, and then he said one thing. He was like, if you are going to allow these guys to come in, don't let them do it mid-season, And so that's what, you let this guy pop up and insert him into the lineup, and we're in February, man. That's crazy. I don't know what Nate Oates is doing, and on top of that, he's not that good of a player to be a. Brandon Miller was okay, so he could stand at the free throw line and deal with all those chants and deal with I don't think bediako is, and man, so I think this is going to end up being a colossal failure.
Well, we will see, and let's hope stronger minds prevail here, with or stronger or better heads, because all the way around, it was so much easier, and the game was so much fun when you knew who was playing, and now it's like, I feel so sorry, Ian, for the kids that are busting their ass that are 17, 18 years old, and they don't even know if they're going to be able to go to school somewhere on a scholarship because people are taking slots from them, and that's got to stop, because you're going at some point, all these players that you're bringing back, they're going to get old. They're not going to be, but you've not developed the next wave of the future of any sport, because if this is going to happen in basketball, you think it ain't going to happen in football? You think it ain't going to happen in baseball? Some minor leaguer that played that, didn't make it, he's going to come back to school, and play baseball for his team again or somewhere else. I mean, where does the madness stop?
It's happening. It's happening in football. That's what the portal's doing with these old teams, man. I listened to a guy, the Stephen Smith, the guy that reports for Alabama, not the ESPN personality. But anyway, he talked about how the portal has single-handedly eliminated the excitement of recruiting. And
absolutely,
man. You remember? I remember being there for them Tim Tebow commitments, and players dragging and switching the hats and stuff like that. Man, these high school players are such a low priority now, which is why I think change will occur, because they don't care about amateurism, but they will care about the dollar, man. And it's too much money on that end, to totally change that game to where fans are disinterested, man, because they're upset, bro. They're upset.
I meant to look this up and kind of investigate this a little bit, but I didn't, and I don't really have a good idea how this could happen. But maybe you do, or maybe we can discuss it right here, right now. Mm-hmm. If I'm a 17-year-old 4-star, 5-star athlete out there, and I can't, and this has happened. A scholarship was offered, and then it was pulled because someone from the portal came in. Mm-hmm. Who do you sue? Because it's not the NCAA. The NCAA is not wanting this to happen, though they are being kind of little punks about it because they're not standing up. It's like they're waiting on the federal government or somebody to step in. I don't know. But what standing do they have? Who do they go after? Because to me, those kids, those parents, all the money that some of these kids have gone to camps, all these things that have done or have gotten up. So, who do they take their fight to? Have you? I wondered about this.
I learned a little while ago that even with the scholarships, man, they're year to year, so
Right.
I don't know, even with that guy, okay, that we get caught into buyouts with the coaches, but I noticed when Dabo was up there giving that tampering speech that he gave, that's one thing that he said, that somebody from Ole Miss texted that kid, whether it was Pete Golden or not, but it's like, how much is your buyout? So, I think the moment that ink hits whatever that is, man, you should have some sort of buyout. But outside of that, I don't know how much they can enforce it, since it's always been like a 1-year thing, so right. I don't know. That's a great question. But I'm not sure on that.
Yeah, that's something we got to look into, because the kids that are suffering to me are the ones in high school that, and if anybody's smart, those are the players you have to develop. You better set up some kind of league, developmental league or something for them, because if not, the game is going to be crap in a few years. It's going to be crap because no one's going to be there to play the game.
Right.
I mean, look at Bryce Underwood. He's played as a true freshman as a quarterback at Michigan. I don't think you're going to see that very many times, much more, for any player now, because of the portal. So I think that's going to be an oddity.
Yeah. Well, I have hope, man. Call me an eternal optimist, but I think, everything is peak and valleys, right? And so right now we have a peak. We have a peak of uncertainty. Nobody knows what's going on. And right now it seems that the teams are in the best position to win are the teams with the most money and the most resources. But I don't know if that will be forever, man. I think you still, I'm watching some of these teams, like, for example, we were laughing at Alabama, and I've been sort of busy. And we were laughing at Alabama, how far they're down in the portal rankings, but man, they're still have projections to have the #1 rated team in 27 high school recruiting.
Right.
You have, Kirby, who's doing the same thing, Dabo. And so I think it's still belief that you got to go through that high school, man. And I want to see a bunch of Indianas. Even Indiana wasn't the way people pictured. Yep. Those guys had a lot of chemistry. They were a ready-made team that transferred in, with great coaching, but I don't know, man. I just have to see it being permanent. And even with these teams that are buying players, man, at the end of the day, they were always in the state with that amount of resources. Players been getting paid forever, just under the table. So why do we expect, just because a team is in a Louisiana or a Texas or whatever, that's oil rich or resource rich, why do we expect them to permanently buy all these players, man? They're just going to settle back to where they were, And so I think, I don't know how long it's going to take, but I think that things will shift back towards the normal, at some point. Call me crazy, but I just see that coming.
I got you. So, hey, with that being said, right here, guys, I see we got a few viewers on here tonight. I want to welcome all you guys to the Veterans Sports Voice podcast. And hey, you're here watching us at YouTube at College Sports Crew. Do us a favor, man. Hit that subscribe button while you're here. We crossed over 100 subscribers after changing platforms at the beginning, somewhere in December, I believe, if not mistaken, or late December. So we're making